Thank you, Irfan, for the wonderful introduction. So I was going to talk a little bit about Indiaspora, but I'll just introduce Alex very quickly. He has worked with us as an advisor, and as Irfan mentioned, he is also the former president and CEO of Grameen Foundation. He is trained under Mohammed Yunus, a 2006 Nobel Peace Prize co-recipient, and he has a Fulbright scholar. He is from Bangladesh. He has also written several works and contributed to the Washington Post, the International Herald Tribune, the Stanford Social Innovation Review, Miami Herald, the Christian Monitor, several others. And he has a new book coming out in just a matter of a few weeks, How to Change the World Without Losing Your Mind. Leadership lessons from 3 decades of social entrepreneurship. So thank you so much, Alex, for moderating this panel.
All right, thank you, Monsi. Let's give Monsi a round of applause. That'll come later.
Yeah, and sorry, I just wanted to say, of course, thank you very much to Irfan for inviting us to collaborate, as well as Deepak and Shania, who collaborated very closely with my colleague, Gabriel Tripp, at Indiaspora. So thank you all.
Well, first of all, you must be a hardy bunch to have found this room. You must be very motivated to be this panel, so we'll try to deliver the goods and have an interactive session. Also, the symbolism around being in Old North made me think, in terms of the Old World, New World, North India, South India, the global North, global South. I don't know. Maybe there's nothing there, but it just got me thinking. I'm going to start by introducing the panel, then I'm going to go through the other parts of the agenda. So to my left is Megha Desai. Is the president of the Desai Foundation, a public nonprofit that elevates the health and livelihood of women and children through community programs in the U.S. and India. And she's the founder of MSD, Marketing Strategy Dharma, a branding and strategic partnership advisory serving social good brands. She sits on the advisory boards of several startups and nonprofits, including Take-Two Academy, Fitzy Health.
Health, yeah.
Okay, and NPR's Generation Listen, as well as being a charter member of the TIE New York. She's also an accomplished singer, so she may answer your questions in song if she so chooses. It could happen at any time. Don't step out for a moment. And she performs with the Resistance Revival Chorus at places like Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center. Smita Siddhanti, who's to her left, founded Indina Inc., an environmental and management consulting firm following a successful 15-year career with leading government and contracting companies, a nationally recognized expert in public health risk assessment and management, and the author of Multiple Perspectives on Risk and Regulation, the Case of Deliberate Release of Genetically Engineered Organisms into the Environment. And she's the current president of TIE DC. And last but not least, Suresh Shenoy is an Indian-American engineer, business executive, philanthropist who is now the president of Wheels Global Foundation, an organization founded in 2013 by alumni of the Indian Institute of Technology based in North America. Long list of things that he's done, but he's right now he's also the executive vice president of Alex Technologies, not owned by me, to my knowledge. A Virginia-based IT systems consulting firm. He served 2 terms as chairman of the National Capital Region of the American Red Cross. So as we talk about philanthropy here in the U.S. by Indian Americans, he'll obviously have a lot to say. So please join me in welcoming our panel. Give me a round of applause. I also want to thank the India Initiative at Georgetown, a great thought leader in diaspora that I've been proud to be associated with, the panelists, and as I said, you all. So let's, before we go to the panel, so what I hope we can do here is I'm going to try to set the scene. There have been quite a number of publications and conference discussions around philanthropy. I'd like to build on them rather than just kind of replow that ground. I want to encourage you all to participate actively throughout and also through social media. And I'm going to ask you to send me ideas that might not come out in the discussion by email, because I'm going to write about this panel, as I do about most panels. We're going to go into, that I facilitate. I'm going to talk to you about, talk with the panel. Then I'm going to ask you to come up with your ideas and your challenges and whatever you want to say to us, and then we're going to wrap up. Okay. So when I've kind of surveyed, and several of us, where could Indian American philanthropy be going? This is a list. You may challenge it. You may have other priorities, but one is there's a gap in terms of the amount of dollars given, and compared to the general American population by most measures. So it might be interesting if you could fill that gap and could create a lot of resources. Some people don't think that gap actually exists. It's more of the survey methodologies, and so I accept that, but this is kind of assuming that to be somewhat valid. Gain more visibility for the volunteerism. Indian Americans volunteer, as we'll see, about twice the rate of Americans generally, but that's not well known. Improve the quality of giving. Not all donations have the same impact, and also to see if you can bring other actors to benefit, and this is really related to philanthropy in India, and all of the needs there and all of the talent there. So let's just go quickly. So what I'd like you to do, and these are just the 4 priorities. And I said, wrong button. That'll do it. So as we think about how we might be able to move forward these 4 priorities or other priorities that you determine, I'd love it as we go through it. Just write down ideas as they come to your head. They don't have to be consistent with what we're saying. They can be diametrically opposed. And then when we open it up, share those along with asking questions, and send them to me because I will include them. We derived 16 ideas in a panel that happened last September. I just want to start from there and come up with even better ones. All right, you guys up for that? Yeah, great. So what do we know? Let's start. There have been 5 studies about different ways about Indian American philanthropy, and I'm going to summarize them very quickly. And when I presented these last September in San Jose, the group, about twice as big as this, came up with 16 ideas and again, I'm going to present you with 4 or 5 of the ones that I thought were the best. So the Bridgespan Dasra article in Stanford Social Innovation Review, the barriers to giving, donor distrust, poor regulation, and second generation Indian Americans being a little distant from India. This is about, again, giving to India, even though this panel includes giving to other priorities. Here we go. And then they talked about, could it be modeled on the kind of Jewish diaspora giving and what creating trustworthy channels and newer generations actively making them feel a part of the original country, or Israel in that case. And this is my addition, this wasn't the article, a kind of a coordination effort rather than fragmentation. And then the action agenda here is more professionalization of NGOs, focus on markets where they're Indian communities, but they're not really, they don't get a lot of programming and speakers, engage people beyond just the donation, and then to realize that they're market segments, so to kind of approach them differently. Not everyone is the same as a philanthropist. So then there's Dahlberg did a report for the Gates Foundation, which they spent about 2 years debating whether it was in public domain or not, and then finally they decided it was, so I can quote it without feeling going to be hauled away in handcuffs or anything. And so they looked at a gap between what is possible to give and existing giving in the U.S. in the billions of dollars, and in the UAE, interestingly, even more. They talk about 6 different types of givers. This is the segmentation. I won't go into those, but and then who's not giving, and they also fall into different categories. I read the paper. It's PowerPoint slides actually. The way lots of things are communicated these days. And they talked about what are the barriers that you have this gap. Well, it's both motivational. Some people just aren't motivated at this point in their life to give. And it's structural. They are, but they feel they're unnecessary barriers. So they say, well, maybe we'll do it later when those barriers get removed. And then they talked about some strategies, kind of a how-to manual, role models, playing up role models, and just kind of having discussion groups, having forums where people can get into these issues and see that there are remaining serious issues, but there are also some effective responses. And then also just on the structural side, rating agencies, policy reform, and more standard reporting. Okay. Now, MacArthur Foundation around the same time came up, and this was the potential, not the gap. And they looked at high net worth Indians, a huge, on an annual basis, almost 12 billion potential. Retail giving, about half of that. Diaspora, about 2 billion, which though you compare that to 71 billion in remittances, and so that's money already flowing. And CSR, 3 to 4 billion.
What's retail giving?
It's just kind of small donations people get through mail or telemarketing rather than high net worth giving. Small ticket size, say under $1,000 US, perhaps, or maybe less than that. Challenges, again, the information isn't there, market structure, monitoring, you want to know whether your money is making an impact. And then Indiaspora has entered into this recently, and they did a survey last summer, and I was part of that, double the national average in the US. So if there's one thing, if you want to just take some pride and get a message out there that isn't well known, and pretty confident in the numbers, the survey methodology. But in addition, giving is about 40% of the general American population. And so if the 40% became 100%, that's 2 to 3 billion a year. That's some meaningful percentage of what the Gates Foundation gives to all causes in all countries. And the perception is Indian Americans give to India, maybe a temple or their home village or something else. But the reality is that a lot of give to local causes. And in the last 3.5 years, over 700 million to higher ed in the US, which is not trivial. So those are some of the things we know. Again, these surveys are potentially these are estimates. There is a blog that I wrote about a session like this that came up with the 16 ideas, and there it is. And then lastly, some ideas that emerged out of that. This is kind of out of 16 of them, is around inculcating a culture of giving, especially among young people, and letting young people serve on the boards of some of these organizations. If you look at the boards of the Pratams and the AIFs and so forth, you'll see a lot of men in their 50s and 60s and 70s, and not many women in their 20s and 30s. And so a diversification and around that's my quick read on it. Leverage technology is a lot of potential, especially among youth, but among everyone in terms of better kind of feedback mechanisms for impact and so forth. Look at this issue of the policy barriers to giving and establish potentially a binational task force to incentivize philanthropy. Educate Indian Americans about the real value proposition of giving, right? It's both doing good, but they're also people, it's a learning experience. It's a valuable networking experience. People with similar values can be. And then realize that a lot of organizations have potential to do good well beyond what they're funded to, and they're very well run, well audited. So these were again kind of 5 of 16 lists. I hope we can build on those today with the panel and with you. So I'm going to leave this up there if it's okay with the panel, just so you guys can keep thinking and not be a passive audience. But let me now turn to the panel. So when you think about philanthropy, where it is today and where it can be, first thing is perhaps I'd like to hear from each of you about who are your role models and why when it comes to philanthropy. And it can be someone very close to you. It can be someone you observe from a distance. So, Megan, you want to jump in?
Yeah. Is this on? Okay. Yeah. It's funny. We have a kind of a saying in our organization that is, first of all, thank you so much for the introduction and for everyone for being here. We always say, give often, give young, and give more than your money. And because of that, my people that I admire are often other organizations that have kind of broken the mold in the way that they've built their charitable giving. So it's very few kind of institutional donors, but more organizations like Mama Hope and like Pencils of Promise that I feel like have really kind of galvanized a young generation of givers. And to your point, it really helps connect them with the cause, provides a networking opportunity for them, and makes them see something through and really participate in giving. So for me right now, my role models are some of these really wonderful organizations that are shifting the way that we connect wealth and giving.
Good to know. Thanks, everyone, for organizing, and of course, thoughtful introduction here by Alex. So I just wanted to say that my own role model, and I don't know a lot of the organizations that you just mentioned, but the industrial, those who came in our generation or before us, and one of the persons that I really admire is Deshpande, who has actually, and I don't know how many of you know about Deshpande, who actually has a Deshpande Foundation. But he has taken this to several levels, not only the MIT. I mean, the many people have made their wealth, but some have used it very effectively, not only the MIT Innovation Lab, but also the whole innovation around development in India that he's taken to centralize in Hubli, and the experiment from there for whole development around the country, and has taken also the industrial models like McDonald's to change the way the food, midday meals for Indian kids. And so I certainly see that as a very serious role model in my way of thinking.
Thanks again for the introduction and for this opportunity to present. I think there's a fairly wide range of role models that have inspired us from a wheels perspective. First and foremost, someone like Mother Teresa, for example, whose famous words were, minds and hands that give are more powerful than lips that pray. So it's not just about kind of a religious calling, if you will, but it's also doing some of the good. Then there are people like, people that you might have never heard of, like Baba Amte in India, who started a leper colony many, many years ago. And they're one of the most self-sustaining, NGOs in the country, which has solar power, healthcare, clean water, sustainable agriculture, and so on, which they have done almost single-handedly. Amazing story if you get a chance to read about it. Then, of course, Deshpande, who happens to be a good friend, a product of the IIT system. Abdul Kalam, the president of India, who actually came to one of our events in 2006. And he said, you guys meet and you talk a lot, but you don't do anything. So he said, why don't you try to solve the big problems of the world? But he never told us what the big problems were. So we sat down and we sort of brainstormed, and we came up with the 6 things that we thought are major challenges: water, healthcare, energy, education, rural livelihoods, and finally sustainability and security, which is what WHEELS is. It's a pretty broad charter, if you will, but most importantly, being engineers, we felt very strongly that the only way to sort of serve a large country like India, or for that matter, even the United States, is by leveraging technology to the hilt. There is just no other way. There's only so much you can do by rolling up your sleeves, but at the end of the day, applying appropriate technology is what does it. And finally, there's couple of entities here in the U.S. There's an organization called Venture Philanthropy Partners, which was started by a fellow by the name of Mario Marino, who sold Legion Software back in the 70s or 80s, one of the first big IT exits. And we've met with him for breakfast, etc. And he actually, I would guess, was the first person to talk in terms of impact investing, how to look at philanthropic giving like an investment, like a venture capital fund, if you will, with measurable returns, which is a very interesting concept. And finally, the American Red Cross, where I served for 6 or 8 years, and I continue to be on their board, which is a whole different sort of philanthropic giving, and most importantly, giving back to the community in which we live. So those are some of the model institutions, if you will.
Great. So I failed my first mandate as the moderator, which was to tell that everyone had to use the microphone, including the audience, and then I didn't say that, nor did I use the microphone during my opening, so which hopefully will not, the filming of this will not make it too bad. But so just the theme that we discussed as we planned were how do you motivate people into philanthropy that might not think of themselves as philanthropists, and particularly young people, and in particular people without a lot of wealth yet? And so how do you, and this has come up in several fora, and I think, Mega, you have a view that one of the problems in motivating people who aren't the Bill Gates or the Suresh Shenoy or the Desh Deshpande is the language we use, and there may be others. So again, bringing in the people of moderate means and also the younger generation.
Absolutely. In order to create a lifelong giver or someone that's going to be connected to a cause, whatever that cause may be, for a long period of time, because that's what you want. You want someone to choose a cause and stick with it, or check a couple causes and stick with it. Because the more that they learn, the more of value they are to that cause. And the better the network they build around that cause. And oftentimes the word philanthropy in and of itself can feel very off-putting. Well, I don't have $100 million. What am I going to give? What kind of contribution can I give? I only made $45,000 a year last year. What could I possibly contribute out of my salary? And, it goes back to this mantra of give young, give often, and give more than your money. And I would rather have a donor for our organization that gives me $50 a month, than gives me $100 a check once, right? Like, to me, and it's not just about the volume of money, but that means that person is going to be checking in, continuing to participate, and helps us with our language. So I just want to be careful that we're not scaring people away by constantly talking about, like, impact investing is a very important concept, and I'm not taking away from that. But again, if I am of modest means, impact investing seems like, well, I can't divest out of oil, I can't do certain things, but how do I make a bigger impact? So I think language is important, and then I think also reminding people that giving isn't always about money. It's also about your time and your expertise, and even just bringing your community out to an event, right? Maybe if I don't even think I have a skill, I can still say, I'm going to get 10 of my friends to show up to this event, and we're going to go and participate.
So the new generation and the non-super wealthy.
I definitely agree that engagement is a very big, very important. And I think constant engagement, and even those with or without wealth are looking not just to write a check, but be engaged. And this is a newer phenomenon. They used to be easily, let's write a check and forget about the problem. Most people are now realizing that they just write the check and we don't know where the check is going. So there is that element, and not necessarily of the super wealthy, but everybody who wants to know where it's going and actually wants to be engaged. But there is a challenge of those who are working on the ground to have this machinery of engagement is a very difficult. And I've been on both sides of the fence, so I can tell that the ones who are working on the ground really have no time to keep reporting or entertaining these guests who come and want to come, or constant. So they need one person to manage this whole, and they just don't have the kind of horsepower. So there are some challenges there, but that is the issue here. How to solve it is another thing, but identifying the problem is the first one.
So I think very often people get engaged in activities when you can answer the question, what's in it for me? All right. So I think it's very important for young people entering, a career or a field to understand that from a marketing standpoint, I can speak from my personal experience that there are a few activities which give you the most opportunity to get exposure to senior people, people who are of means and willing to give. One of them is arts and sciences, basic activities, like if you belong to the Kennedy Center or something like that and actively participate, you're going to meet the likes of David Rubenstein, who is the chairman of the board, as an example. The other is, when you start taking part in community activities. And, for example, involving yourself in the Red Cross typically is going to bring you in together with senior executives of local organizations, entities who support organizations like the Red Cross that serve the local community. So if you want to network, if you want to get known in the community, then get involved in community activities that are dear to you, whether it's arts or sciences or any other. So that's one way to show that volunteering your time is as much of establishing your personal brand as it is to giving back to the community. So that's a very important lesson to learn, if you will, because there is I think, a false perception that philanthropy is only about giving money. But in the Hindu philosophy, if you will, they talk about tan, man, and dhan. And loosely translated in English, it means time, talent, and treasure. So philanthropy is not just about treasure. It's also about time and talent. And almost everyone in this room, at least gauging from the interactions that I've had, you have amazing amount of time and talent. Maybe not time, but certainly talent. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So almost, any one of these three is equally important. So you don't have to give money, but you can give your time and your talent. So when we talk about applying technology to scale philanthropy, it's not just any technology, but it's the appropriate technology, and you can make that choice for the people who need it. So that's one way of getting involved.
Can I add one more note on that?
Please, yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more on what you said. Both of your comments are exactly right. The other thing I was thinking about, what you had touched upon earlier, was about connecting, the next generations of South Asians that live in America to the work in India. I hear about this a lot. I spend so much time in rural villages and in India, but even my friends that were born and raised in Bombay have never been to a rural village. So it was one of those things where, how am I going to expect for second generation, third generation South Asians to have visited these rural places, which it's not always about visiting, but it's about having that connection, as you mentioned. And so how do we create that connection? And for me, the connection has always been through the arts. And so, really supporting South Asian creative arts, whether it's film, whether it's music, whether it's dance, it's a great gateway drug to being connected to India. And so that, it's also about creating that connection with both the US and India. So there are some people that want to give just in India. There are some people that just want to give here locally. Both are good, but if the ultimate goal is to make sure that we're continuing that flow of interest to India, is how do you participate in activities that are continuing to connect them to India?
That's great. It's very unusual in the first half of a panel for someone to bring up the term gateway drug. That usually happens in the second half, and I don't know. But so just 3 comments before we go to the next one. This idea of monthly giving, and I want to. So one of the things, it's something I actually learned about philanthropy only as a fundraiser. That typically what happens when a donor, and just of modest means, you give $100 to a charity, just support a friend or for whatever, you see something on TV. What typically happens is, and then you say, but that's not my main priority. They're going to slowly give that $100 back to you by sending you things in the mail over years, and pretty much it ends up being a 0 donation if you wait long enough. Whereas what I'm doing now is I'm picking, I give a lot by my means to 3 or 4, but if I'm going to support an organization or even a political candidate, I give a modest amount on a monthly basis. They don't have to keep soliciting me, and I can stop at any time. And it's actually a much more efficient way, and it scales to any level of donation. The second thing, just to pick up on your point, it's what in the earlier session last September, they talked about the value proposition of giving. And I think we could do a much better job of, and just to give one example, a lawyer that did a lot of pro bono work for Grameen Foundation, he was so good at one narrow part of the law, such a high billing rate, that he was so bored because no one would hire him to do anything else except pro bono work. Where he could kind of learn new things for the first time in years, right? So the value proposition, and then lastly, this appropriate technology, both on the implementation side, but also on the engagement side. And if any of you have ideas about how technology can be used to keep donors from being passive, but in really having them be engaged. But let's talk a little bit about Indian Americans giving and volunteering in the United States, in the communities that they're in. And I know at least 2 of you, probably all of you, have experience in this, doing it, and also an observer of it. What are the best practices, and how is it different than trying to make an impact 8,000 miles away through your giving?
First of all, it's important to recognize that we are a transition generation, especially first-generation immigrants like me and others. You were probably born and raised here. But at least I know Smita and I were both born and raised in India and came here post our college education. So we our children, have a kind of a split loyalty. We have a split loyalty. The children have a more difficult time getting, sort of accustomed to it, because they were born and raised here, and they're as much of a, foreigner or a visitor to India when they go there, then they would, they what do you call, relate to more their American colleagues and friends and so on and so forth. So our generation, what I would call the first generation immigrant, typically has split loyalties, in the sense that we feel that we owe something to the taxpayer who helped pay for our education, to our country by birth, and at the same time we feel obligated that to the community that has adopted us, or we have adopted. So there is a certain innate kind of a drive to serve both. Okay, and that's very difficult. My dad used to tell me, you cannot cross a river with your feet on two different boats. You got to pick one and stick to it. Otherwise you'll never make it. So in that sense, our children, I often told them that, listen, you don't have to feel obligated to India because you were not born there. You were born here, so learn to serve your community first. And then that doesn't mean that, you shouldn't serve India, because there are some anthropological studies which have gone on to say that people who take pride in their heritage tend to be more self-confident and successful than those who don't. And if you're interested in that study and some more information, I'm happy to answer questions on that. And if you've seen the series Roots, which was long before most of you were born, back in the 80s, it's a story of how the African American community was brought here as slaves, and they didn't know which country they came from. So when you talk to an average African American in America, they are more loyal to the state that they belong to than to Africa. Whereas when you talk to a typical European immigrant or European of European origin, they will tell you within half an hour that I'm half German or I'm half English or whatever. Okay, so they take pride in their heritage, and it usually takes more than 3 generations before you are fully assimilated in a community, especially if you're of a different ethnic group. So my hope is that my grandchildren, I have 3 of them, will truly be Americans in that sense. So the message is that wherever you live, learn to give, because there's more fun in giving than getting. Then after that, serving your country by origin probably brings more pride than anything else. So, but that doesn't mean that you do it at the exclusion of other needy communities. There are a lot of philanthropies there to serve places like Africa, for example, or even within the United States, other states. So first is building the culture of giving. Second is giving back just for pride, to sort of help the communities that you came from. And once you inculcate that culture, you build that culture in your children, I think then things start to happen. So I take a lot of pride in my own son, my second son, who's in his early 30s right now. He serves on the board of the school board and the library board in Carrollton, Texas. And he's probably one of the younger kids in that group. And he often tells me how much fun it is, because he meets all kinds of really fun, interesting people who want to do that for their community. So that's, sort of a quick
Thank you. And I hope maybe we'll hear more about your also Red Cross experience at some point. But interesting that the openness of community organizations in the U.S. to bring people into governance roles when they're still young might be an interesting lesson. But the U.S. Giving and philanthropy, any thoughts on that, Smita?
To just pick up on the same point, and I think this is a very valid point to understand the findings that you have, and I'm sure it's not anything new, but this first generation, and I'd like to know what happened to other, like Israel, as you said, the Jewish people. What happened to the first generation? Because the first generation isn't that squandery thing, because you really have a loyalty and you go back a lot, and of course your parents are there and your brothers, sisters, and all that stuff. So there's a lot of connection to India. So giving back immediately is very, very important to India, and lots of Indians here do that for their cities and villages and schools, and whatever they have come from, and they definitely go back. They do that giving, and very satisfying to them to go back and get that. So that's a whole element of pressure that they take on willingly. The new element, of course, is that you're living here. So of course, there's this, there's that. So we are always, giving to United Way or Red Cross, or that happens very naturally here, living here. So, and then there's a whole element, the third dimension, which is that because you're the first generation and you're trying to establish your own roots and identity, that there's a lot of money that Indians give to the temples and community kind of activities, which brings the community together, and the confidence and the support system. So there's three prongs that this generation is truly acting on, is India and here, and they're in their own businesses that we are developing and giving employment to, and we do make sure we encourage all our employees and us to do good for others. So there is that pressure to be understood for that gap. The time that everybody's giving is very hard to measure. The one that they're giving back to India is also very hard to measure, because they're giving individually a lot rather than organizationally. So I don't know how the measure happens there. But there seems to be, in my at least observation and knowledge, that there's a lot of different kinds of giving going on within the Indian community. Hard to measure all of that in the survey.
So a really quick story of that kind of connects all these dots. When I was in the fourth grade, I remember walking down the hall of my school and seeing a poster for a Project Bread walkathon, right? Like a 20-mile walkathon. And I remember going home and asking my father, who is this feeding? Look, I'd seen hungry people in India. I'd never seen hungry people in America before, because hunger looks really different here in America than it does in India. And my naivete and the bubble and the privilege that I grew up in, I was confounded. I'm like, there are hungry people here in the richest place in the world? And so I was like, well, we have to do something about this. And at 4 years old, my fourth grade, I convinced my father that I was capable of walking 20 miles. And for the next decade, I did this walk for hunger. And, it has been proven time and time again that if you volunteer, if you get up and do something, it positively affects your health, your actual health, not your mindset, not your whatever. Your physical health improves when you volunteer. So I think the idea of connecting these two continents and connecting these things, it's about understanding and exercising the muscle of giving. And when you start exercising that muscle in whatever region, whether it's here, whether it's there, whether it's volunteering with your school, with your church, whatever the case may be, exercising that volunteer muscle leads to long-term volunteerism. And so wherever your business takes you, wherever your life takes you.
Long-term volunteer, but also long-term well-being.
Long-term well-being, right? And makes you a better long-term giver. So we work with IIT Gandhinagar and we work with Columbia University, using the students there to volunteer in the villages around the communities. And I can tell you that it's a long bet, right? My investment is a long-term investment, that these kids that are graduating from IIT and from Columbia University are going to be the future leaders of tomorrow. And hopefully, just hopefully, when they build the next Google and the next, SaaS company, that they're thinking more strategically about impact and sustainability. And so, there are a lot of different angles into how you can connect, young people and the next generation. It may not always look the same, but long-term impact is long-term impact.
So we're going to do a quick lightning round, and then we're going to open it up. But just a little guidance. If you haven't spent a lot of time contemplating the image of crossing a river with your feet in two different boats, I wouldn't recommend it. It's a little, anyway. So let me just do a quick, it's a little different from what we planned, but if the people in this room are going to come into, earn, inherit a certain amount of money over the course of the next 30 years. And it's probably not a small number, it's not a huge number, but it's a significant number. So if in the view of philanthropy that we are all likely to practice, is there some technique that you would strongly advise people practice? And is there a technique or a mindset that you would urge people not to practice?
So just like you're not going to marry the first person you go on a date with, you should also date different nonprofits. And the way that you do that is you give small donations, you go to the events, you get to know how they operate, and not just what they do, but how they operate. And so the difference is, you can be an organization that builds wells, but you could be an organization that's building wells for the sheer number of building wells rather than understanding the actual impact that the wells are making. And so maybe that organization is building wells too close together. Maybe they're building those wells between rival tribes and actually causing more problems than they are solving. So it's about the model. And the model itself is, like for example, our model is very, we basically run a startup studio, right? We have these programs that are incubated, these programs that are piloted, and these programs that are scalable. The people that come to us tend to be entrepreneurs that have done it themselves because they're very passionate about the model. So it's, yes, they care about sanitary napkins and they care about the vocational training, but really they're very fascinated by the model. And those people, when they stay at our table long enough, really contribute to the way that we build our model. You have to figure out what, do I care about this cause and do I care about this model and the way that they're creating their impact? The second thing is, a lot of people don't take the time to do this, which is every year I sit down and, when you're doing your resolutions, I always think what are the 4 values to me that are really important? And, find organizations that align with those values. Because if an organization doesn't share your values or isn't in a bucket that you actually care deeply passionate about, then it doesn't have that impact for you, right? So if you're going to be working long term with an organization. And then my third thing, which is just final note on that, is is around decide the commitment that you want to make. So is this something that you want to bring all of your friends into the fold about, or is this something that's a personal pride for you? And either one of those things is okay. It's just about creating that culture. Is this something I'm doing for me, for my family, for the good of my community? Because your interaction will change.
Good practice, a practice to avoid.
Okay. A couple of things in terms of leadership. Craig Barrett, once said that, if you want to lead a parade, go and stand in front of it. Okay, it's the simplest way to do it. So find the parade that you want to lead and learn how to go and stand in front of it. And I've always said that there are 2 types of people on earth. There are sheep and there are shepherds. And you make a choice very early on whether you want to be a sheep or a shepherd. Okay, I would suspect that most people in this room want to be shepherds, and therefore you have to create that vision of where you want to go, where you want to lead, and what your end goal is, if you will. In terms of best practices, I can tell you, having led a large organization like the Red Cross, there's a lot of episodic giving. Okay, it's feast or famine at the Red Cross. When there's an earthquake in Haiti and millions of people are killed or injured, money just pours from everywhere. But when there is no calamity, when we had the tsunami in India and Indonesia, we were collecting money that we didn't know what to do with. Okay, but when there is no, disaster, the Red Cross is begging for money.
And it's really about a visible disaster.
A visible disaster. But the irony of it is that just in the general DC national capital area, we have the equivalent of 1 Haiti every year. This is by small, home fires, people getting injured, accidents and so on. We have 1 Haiti every year. Think about that. So that's a major disaster. So making people aware that there are continuing needs, not just episodic, requirements, is a very important part of the education process in terms of giving. And in terms of the culture, if you will, of building that, is that the problems that we face today, this morning I got a note saying that the city of Cape Town in South Africa is the first major city, to literally run out of drinking water. And the next big city that's going to face that calamity is Bangalore in India with 12 million people. So these problems are disruptive in nature, and therefore you have to come up with disruptive solutions. Okay, solutions that are not the standard roll up your sleeves and go and dig a well. Okay, you got to think in terms of how technology can be applied in massively scalable proportions. Okay, and we had a great meeting once at the University of Pennsylvania where they were talking about use of robotics and drones to sort of gather data and see which areas are running out of water, collecting, and doing some predictive analytics so you're prepared for it. I mean, applying that kind of technology for rural requirements is something that only people in this room can do, okay, not the villagers that you're going to serve. So looking for those disruptive solutions is very important. And one final word, based on our own experience at Wheels, what we have come to realize is it's not about one technology. It's not just solving the water problem or the healthcare problem or the sanitation problem. You almost have to take an integrated approach where there's no point in trying to go for good health when there's garbage littered all over the place. So we adopted something called the Zero Garbage Program, okay, and that we just conducted a big kind of a classroom session with the Swachh Bharat folks. So he's saying, here are all the options that you have to clear a place of garbage, okay? And without clean cities and clean villages, you cannot have good health, okay, as an example. The final point I want to make is, that kind of philanthropy cannot be episodic. You cannot just go into a village and say, I'm going to put in a RO plant, get you some clean water and walk away. It's a commitment. It has to be a public-private partnership where it's not just about you doing something, but it's the local people buying into what you're doing and committing to it, not only for the next 6 months or 6 years, but for 60 years maybe. And that kind of commitment needs to be made to make a particular initiative work in the long term. And it can only happen if you also create local wealth. So people find jobs, people find a way to not only do good, but also make money at the same time. So take the entrepreneurial approach, implement the right technology, make the business model work so people can make money while they're doing good, and there is a long-term commitment.
Okay. Good. Well, can we go to the audience, or do you want to? Absolutely. Okay. Well, if someone could help pass around a mic and go right ahead. Introduce yourself and.
Hi. My name is Hitan Ghosh. I'm the founder president of Wills Global Foundation. Listening to this one thing I would like to add is the measurement and also technology impact. Let me give you a simple example which I faced myself. Myself and Suresh just came back from a conference where about 600 NGOs came in talking about some things Suresh is talking about. And the keynote speaker was Jayanti Robi. He's the Principal Secretary for Health for Gujarat. I met her a year ago, talked about our thing that we're doing, what is meant by technology. And we talked about the technology that we have developed in IIT Mumbai, which basically translates in 16 languages. So whatever you do standard communication, it can be translated into 16 languages. In India, it's very important. Because local people does not understand English. And if you do with the local languages, you always get the benefit. So that was about the discussion. So in the meantime, we have developed a video called 1,000 Days of a Child's Life. Took some money and some good research from good doctors, and the video was made, and it made something like 9 languages. We are continuing to do rest. So during the keynote speech, she said, measurement is so important, and she gave an example of this video. Is I have now studied this thing. If you make 1 rupee investment in this 1,000 days of a child's life and use technology means instead of having this knowledge restricted in Gujarat, it will be all over India. So now you are getting the benefit multiplied by 16 or 20 times at the same time. So she said, it is like 84 to 1 ratio if you do that investment in the first 1,000 days, versus you take the same 1 rupee after 5 years in a child's life, you get 1.5 to 2 rupees. So you can immediately see the measurements is an impact. So on my side was sitting a gentleman, he's a vice chairman of Ekal Vidyalaya. They have got an excellent education program in the primary school in 135,000 villages where a teacher exists. On this side was a gentleman who is developing that technology, Professor Mukherjee in IIT Mumbai. that says, Madam, you have developed this technology, and this gentleman here, why you don't take this thing what you hear and release this thing immediately to all? In the same night, this gentleman, vice chairman, called up all these people, released it 83,000 villages.
Wow.
Just in technology allows you to do that.
Mr. Ghosh, if we could move on.
Yeah, but I'm giving the example of the
Please.
impact we're talking about and technology. Rather than talking about generalities, unless you see the real impact, you never penetrate you. It just struck me when she was giving that number. I said, what am I doing with all this thing that is developing and not connecting?
That's
So
very
key
powerful.
part is as the keynote says, you must do it right away, now, because the villagers don't have 10 years to wait.
Very good.
So if technology and impact is very important part of philanthropy.
So I want to bring some of the students in, but just to maybe this gentleman here, but the importance of measurement, the importance of technology for scale, local languages, early interventions. These are great ideas. Please.
Hi, sorry, my name is Dhruv. I'm a sophomore here at Georgetown. So I was thinking about what you were mentioning about local level volunteering, specifically in IIT Gandhinagar and things like that. So I was just remembering when I was in school, I went to a boarding school in away from a big city, and we used to do a lot of social service work in our local communities. And one of the barriers which I saw to on a high school level for students specifically was this contempt towards being forced to do community service because it had been mandated by school curriculums. So I'm just, and it's something that a lot of people have been trying to solve for a while, because how do you willingly get students out into the open? And I was just wondering if you had any ideas or thoughts as to how to approach that issue differently.
It's a great question. And actually, the president of IIT, Gandhinagar, and I have this conversation all the time because the propensity is to want to create some sort of an incentive, right? It's interesting, the word intern and the word volunteer in India are very different than they are here. So I remember early on as I took over this organization, I would see cost summaries, and I'm like, I thought we hired 20 volunteers. Why is there a huge number at the bottom of this spreadsheet? But so, what are the incentives, and how do you get people to do it? So at IIT Gandhinagar, what we've done is we've worked with a multitude of different departments at the school to make sure that every time we do anything, it is at the heart of campus. Our fairs are big, they are sexy, people want to be a part of this. And so in just 2 years, we went from having 22 volunteers to having 108 volunteers. And so it's slow and it's small, right? The campus has many more people than that. But as we continue to create programs that people get excited about, as we continue to expand our variety of programs, so it's not just that we only do health camps. We have health camps, we have teaching opportunities, we have a variety of different volunteer opportunities. So student A has a different interest than student B, and that's how you can connect them. Because I don't think that making anything mandatory brings joy to anything. And it also doesn't bring any dignity. And if we're going to tout at the Desai Foundation that we're about cultivating people's dignity, it has to be at the people participating in our work, not just the people we serve. And so for us, the dignity has to be reciprocal. And so in U.S. also, sorry, go ahead. That's fine.
No, go ahead.
No, sorry. Finish your thought. In the U.S., similarly, when we do this same program, again, it's about creating that network, that community that we were talking about, right? So, I mean, I know this is going to sound silly, but at Columbia, the reason why a lot of the boys volunteer is because the girls from the girls' school come and volunteer, and it's an opportunity for them to meet girls. But guess what? Then they fall in love with the work, and then they continue on after. So, it's about creating community and connectivity.
Talk about the value proposition of giving.
No, but that just definitely, what you just said brings out the right answer, sort of, to what your question is. Everybody individually, I think, wants to do good. There is no question about it. And every child, especially the youth, and even the tired of us, want to do well, right? So everybody, but the mechanisms of getting there, and ease of the mechanism of giving back, not just money, but the time and the involvement, I think there's a lot of focus that needs to be given to that mechanism of getting back from the older generation, the younger generation. And I don't know of many organizations who are just working on the mechanism. I mean, like the IITs working on all the various innovations. My God, amazing stuff of appropriate technology. My father, who started the biggest effort, this was 50 years back, a Center of Science for Villages with all the national labs in the country and the IITs, and he started the rural development parts of all the IITs, especially started in Delhi, was exactly to get all the research that's being done to somewhere collectively say, so how are we solving the problem? What are you doing to solve the problem of the villages? So things do exist. The mechanism of getting out is lacking. So I think that that's some focus has to be given to that to make it easier for the kids, as they say. How do we voluntarily go? Where do we find out how to go without the hunter on us or whatever else, right?
There's a lot of unnecessary friction in both volunteering and giving and
Well, I think first and foremost, there's got to be some creation of awareness of the needs. Okay, so for example, one of the realities is that in the next decade or so, more than 40% of the jobs as we know it is going to go away. Okay, to automation and so on. So young people, who are graduating college now have some serious, thinking to do as to what kind of a job am I going to get into. And if you read C.K. Prahlad's book about the opportunities at the bottom of the pyramid, it tells you that there is a very large segment of the population, because all the technology that has been developed in the last 200 years or so has served perhaps the 10% of the population of the world. So there is a very large underserved population which can take advantage of the technology that has resulted in those 200 years. So when you go to India, for example, every time I go, I'm surprised and shocked by how quickly people have adopted to smartphones, for example. Even in villages, they know how to look at stock prices and weather reports and things like that. So there's a tremendous amount of technology adoption. The adoption curve has gone up a lot. And for students who are graduating now, need to look at those 600 or 700 million people who have not been served by technology, and there is money to be made there. It's not just about charitable giving, but there are some real career opportunities there.
Do we need to wrap now, or we have a couple of 5 minutes? Okay, so let's take 2 more, 1 and 2, and then we'll react, and then we'll turn on. So go ahead, sir.
Yeah, my name is Siva Subramaniam. I'm actually a professor on the medical campus here at Georgetown. I've been involved in 3 different projects. One, because of what I do, I'm involved in infant mortality reduction and women's mortality reduction in many countries across the world as a part of the global health. And in fact, just so happened, I just received the news, we got a grant to do some specific things at Ghana to rework in terms of with one of my associates. She has worked extensively in Africa. And so we are going to look at that in terms of this. If the outcome comes out as we expected in this, then it is scalable, to all the countries that they can implement this at the primary, secondary level of care. That is one. And what we are specifically doing is involving 2 young students from the global health area here, so that they can then, continue, in terms of in that fold, if they like, what they want to do. The second is, what you said is absolutely right. We do something for the country that we came from, and something we do for here. For the country, I am the coordinator for AIM for Seva, All India Movement for Seva, Seva being service. And so this whole idea is creating hundreds of chatralayas, or the free student homes, and where we give free boarding, lodging, books, and all that. And so we raise money from here. Now, even though in the last 15 years, it has been slowly going up, now we are able to raise about $2 million a year to be able to give that, in terms of annually, to be able to support those children's education, thousands every year, going beyond the high school to college and stuff. But again, the important part is, how do we involve the children to help the children? So the whole theme is children helping the children there, $10, not even monthly, annually, if they can give. So that's the way we're looking.
Thank you. Arjun, I'm an undergrad here. So it was mentioned that temple giving is big in India, right? And now we're seeing the proliferation of universities as well. I'm curious about the American style of giving, right? We have like big cultural and arts institutions in New York, bankrolled by industrial houses. While there are flaws of that model, as Anand Giridhar Das so eloquently put in his book, I'm curious what that kind of model might look like in India, where we can see big, maybe creation of arts, culture, and like institutions that can actually last not just for years, but even for decades or generations.
Do you mean specifically like South Asian arts in the U.S., or do you mean arts in general?
In India itself.
In India.
A similar model, could we transpose that?
Yeah. I don't have a good answer for the one in India, but I can tell you that the American model is a little bit more diverse than I think that you just characterized it, in terms of there's these big institutional givers here, but then there are also a slew of other organizations in between. And I think that that's what we need to learn from, right? The institutional giving is always going to exist, and that already exists in India. But this middle ground of giving, these other large checks between sizes of 100,000 and 5 million, where you're really going to create that sustainable impact to create arts and culture in India. And it's got to come from the next generation, because otherwise we're not going to see the type of sustainable arts programs that we really want to see.
So one final note, since I'm an entrepreneur, I think that if I have to give one message to everybody, and especially the youth here, the business proposition, as Suresh said, there's a lot of business to be had for creating good work. One of the big business propositions is just exactly that, is the creating the models, a business that creates those models and enables various organizations to make such a thing happen that you just asked about, that the whole chain. Similarly, a model of actually coming up with a business model in which you can engage. How do you engage this various sectors of population? Even teachers, retired teachers in India. I mean, and what do they do? How do they give back? Everybody else can be giving back. How do they give back? The mechanisms of giving back within India and from even here is a business model in itself. I mean, and that needs to be followed.
We're out of time. I just want to ask you all to, if you want to, I'm going to be writing up these proceedings, the best ideas. Send them to me if you didn't get a chance. I'm sorry we didn't leave as much time for discussion and ideas from the audience as we possibly could have. But I'd like you all to just join me in thanking the Georgetown India Initiative in Diaspora and our panel.